so much for being on my podcast today.
Great pleasure.
And yeah, we're just going to get started right away. I was wondering, if you imagine you were at a birthday party and you did some small talk with someone who you had never met before, and they ask you, so what do? What would your answer be?
Well, I'd say what I do now is train people to use their voices better, particularly in music, for singers and so on. But before that, of course, I was a performer, opera singer myself, and went through the whole process. Of course, as an opera singer, you have to make a substantial sound, so you have to think pretty carefully about how the sound is produced and how you can project it. And then I started my own company because I had certain creative ideas I wanted to see through, which involved me in training a company and then taking them out on the road and doing lots of performances, learning through performance and learning through the interaction between you and the audience. Yeah, so that's what I do.
I think that's a pretty exciting answer to such a question.
Yeah, from a very early age, I've just loved, using my voice and communicating. Yeah.
I've read about you that you studied English at Cambridge before you started your performing career, and I was wondering, how did this transition happen from being a literature or English student to an opera singer?
Well, I was always a singer because before Cambridge I sang for 10 years as a choir boy and then later as what they call a lay clerk at a good level, choral level, and cathedral choir and then college choir. And started singing cabaret when I was in my teens and started performing while I was on stage when I was at Cambridge. So I'd sort of decided before I went, I think, that I wanted to be a professional performer. But always had an interest in English and realized that understanding the text, being able to analyze the text, is a very important part of being a singer, a recitalist and an opera singer. So, of course, I've always had an interest in language, and, of course, I've had to sing in at least 4 languages a lot, and get into the real core of the language. So English, I found, was a really good subject to do, with a view to being a performer, using language as a performer.
Yeah, so music has always been part of your life, and then that was kind of a way to get even more...
Yeah, the music and the delivery of text, because I did a certain amount of acting as well, so getting the text across. So that's always helped me, I think, as a singer, being able to really understand the text and the imagery and the poetic devices that are being used in the text.
And then back then, was it a usual pathway to not go to conservatoire first, if you wanted to
I didn't. I had very, very good private tuition, good technical work and coaching. And in fact, I had, when I left university, I had to start work. I had to work, for my living. Although I was offered, conservatoire places, I chose the path. And in fact, I was very lucky, and I've had lots of luck in my life. The right person, guide, if you like, turning up at the right time. Right from the start, my first mentor was a top international organist who ran the choir at the cathedral. So I learned the basic musical skill, the proficiency from him, was inspired by him. But when I left Cambridge, I had to work, a 9-to-5 job during the week. So I went to an evening class twice a week and all day Saturday, which was an opera workshop. And it was just very well run by a lady called Elsa Meyer-Liesman, who brought in very good people. And the people who came in, the other students, both the pianists and the singers, we were a good, really good level. So that's what I did. And after 6 months of that, I had enough skills to get a job, I started in the chorus at a very good company, the Welsh National Opera Company.
Okay.
So I learned from that. I learned sort of like an apprenticeship, really. I watched and listened and was given advice all the time. Some very, very good training from a singer who sort of took me under his wing, he was my mentor. So I did it that way rather than conservatoire way.
Do you think that's quite an unusual way, or do you?
Well, it is a bit unusual.
Yeah.
It worked for me. It wouldn't work necessarily for everybody, I don't suppose. But I did the year with the company and started singing small parts and learning from that. And then I was lucky enough to get money to study abroad for a period, not in a conservatoire, but in an American university, had a graduate school of fine arts in Florence. So I went there and worked with one of the great masters, a baritone called Tito Gobbi, who was Maria Callas's favourite baritone. So he was just finishing his career. In fact, while I was working with him, he did his final performance at Covent Garden. And so that was a wonderful relationship, the master-student relationship. So I learned a lot from him over 2 or 3 years. Not the whole year, because by that time I was getting enough work in the winter in London, either from professional choir work or solo work. So that worked very well.
Do you still have a mentor or someone that you're learning from, or do you feel like you've reached a stage where you feel quite confident?
Not with singing, but with piano playing, yeah.
Okay, yes. You told me you had jazz lessons recently.
Yes. But I think there's a great comment from an Eastern philosopher saying we teach what we most need to learn. So from teaching, I've learned an enormous. So now my teachers now are my students. From having to try and convey to them what I've learned over these years, and we're talking about quite a few decades. I now have to work out how can I put that across, and from the relationship with the student, it's very exciting. You learn probably to be a better performer yourself. And learn how to teach, basically. Yeah, I think. So I keep practicing. I keep it going, and I will, like more of the case probably with instrumental performers and teachers. I remember Casals when he was 90 or something. He was practicing away one day, and somebody said, "Why do you still practice? I mean." And he said, "I think I might be getting somewhere."
Yeah.
So I have the same sort of attitude, so I practice, and you, even, teaching, you learn a lot from your students, but just practicing some days you say, "Oh, that's interesting." And I got that from some stimulus, like a new piece of repertoire, a different piece of repertoire, or from something a student did, or just listening to a student, like I've been doing assessments all day, and thinking, that's interesting. How would I improve that, or how would I make that usable in the profession, sort of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting with music. I think there's no one way to do something correct.
No.
So as you kind of mentioned, you can even learn from your students maybe. Want to look at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
So
And there are all sorts of things you learn from which are not necessarily directly related to music, because you're trying to express a human condition or a human emotion, aren't you? So that applies to everybody. Yeah.
So kind of coming back to more the beginning of your career again, I was wondering, is there any, when you can trace all the opportunities that you've had over the years, or the performances, back to maybe one beginning, like a decision or a moment or an opportunity you had, do you think you could do that?
What was the sort of springing off point? Certainly going to Italy and working with this great man with his immense experience was a very important sort of springboard to have that opportunity. I've always been very comfortable performing in front of an audience. And always enjoyed telling my stories, it's like simple storytelling, like even just telling a joke in the pub. I've always had a natural ability to do that, as a number of singing colleagues I know have. Just that we love to tell stories and make people laugh. So that's always been a sort of fundamental part of my life. So I think I was always going to be a performer. But I had a very good basic ground, musical grounding in these very good choirs I sang in. And then it was a question of the next sort of point was to then learn how to perform and learn how to express the emotions and thoughts of a particular character. And my Italian mentor was an absolute master of that. And also I also was very good at sport. I came from a sort of quite a physical, coordinated life as a sportsman. And he did as well, interestingly.
Okay, yeah.
And stressed in the importance of being strong and physically fit in order to perform, So that's a very important aspect which has brought me, over the last 20 odd years and into yoga and using yoga as a teaching tool, in many ways.
Yeah, we're definitely going to come back to the
yoga
part later as well.
Later,
So, I just asked you about the kind of starting point, and I've read that your professional debut was as the Count Almaviva in Mozart's Marriage of Figaro.
Yeah.
This is, of course, quite a big role to get, and it was with Glyndebourne Tour, is that correct?
Glyndebourne, yeah.
And I was wondering, how did you end up getting this job, and did it kind of open up lots of other opportunities?
Well, when I came out from Italy, I then applied for the Glyndebourne course. And that was fantastic because if you covered something during the season, then you did it on the tour that as a result, and that's exactly what happened. I was accepted into the chorus. I was also given the cover of Count Almaviva. So I had this wonderful period of time to work on it for quite a few months before I actually did it, with very good coaching and seeing the more experienced performers doing it and watching, and sometimes standing in a rehearsal and working with these very experienced singers. So it was a fantastic learning experience.
I can imagine.
And then that's how the opportunity came about, simply by auditioning for Glyndebourne. And of course, a lot of my contemporaries the same have had careers as a result of this wonderful initiation, as it were. And Glyndebourne is sort of unique in the sense that you're, it's in the middle of the country, so you're very focused. London's fantastic, but it's quite distracting. Whereas Glyndebourne, that's what you do. You go there and you really study an opera. And the people I worked with there had again, like Godby, had been doing it for a very long time. And most of them come from Europe, and with the key information one needed.
How did that feel working with, in such a prestigious kind of setting? Do you feel like it kind of boosted your confidence more, or was it more made you question yourself? Oh, am I really good enough?
No, I think it boosted my confidence. Well, it boosted my certainty about what needed to be done, and how hard you had to work, not only musically but also on the language, on the Italian language. And there was a wonderful Italian coach there, called Ubaldo Gardini, who he was just so insistent that we get it right. Because for an English speaker, it's quite a big transition to speak well in Italian, to sing and deliver Italian well. And he was an absolute master of that. But he was also a musician. He was, in fact, a very fine violinist. And I was a violinist, and he made a connection between the legato of the language, which is distinctive of Italian. It's a very legato language. You keep the sound going all the time. It's very different from English. He made the connection between that and keeping the bow, on the string, and so that was very helpful in getting the Italian right. Yeah.
You mentioned just working hard and spending a lot of time. So what would a typical day would have looked like in that time, or even after working with Blind Born? Like
my typical working day. I did probably do a bit of physical exercise before I'd start to practice. Not in those days, it wasn't yoga so much as just because I was generally fit anyway, because I played sport. Just toning himself. It wasn't until later that I started doing a little bit of gentle gym work, or just regular gym work in order to keep the muscles in good condition. Because you use your whole body, like with any instrument, really. The whole body has to be balanced. It's a holistic experience, yeah. And then I'd practice for 2 or 3 hours probably. Not only singing practice, but also just really learning words. It takes a long time to prepare an operatic role, just as it does to prepare a piano concerto. And when you get asked to do it, you want to have that preparation to have been done, because usually if you're asked to do it, there won't be time to do it, if it's a completely new role. So this is what Godby said to me when I said, so what do I do now? He said, well, just decide what roles mainstream roles, like Count Amaviva, and you think you realize you will perform because of your voice character type. The baritone voice, you usually play aristocratic characters, you play guys which are going to be manipulating situations, They won't necessarily be the romantic hero. They're more likely to be the guy who puts a spoke in the works. Is that the expression?
No. Spanner?
A spanner, not a spoke. A spanner in the spokes, yeah. That's right, very good. Puts a spanner in. Or, is you'd say in drama, is the antagonist. He's the guy who's making it, creating the resistance for the hero to show what he's really worth, Great roles, great character roles. So decide on those and really, work on them. So your morning routine wouldn't just involve learning the music. It would really involve working on the language, especially if it's not your own language, really, so that it becomes idiomatic, so it becomes like it's your language. So you do things like say the Italian word, I go into la casa, and then you say, we've won our case. I did into la casa, we've won our case. So say it in English until you're more sort of fluent in the languages. So you knew exactly where you were when you expressed that line. I do it with students now, even Chinese students. I say, okay, there's the Italian, say the Italian. Okay, now say that same, you know what it means? Yes. Say that in Chinese. And they find that really helpful.
Ah, okay, yeah. I've never thought of that.
Yeah, so because the language, something like, Anche vinto la casa is not very good. So, alzati là tua figlio te concedo rivedere. Get up, he's saying to his wife, who's kneeling in front of him. You can see your son once more, So you then said again, with that set of intention in it, alzati là tuo figlio ti concedo rivedere. So that English is my language, your language is Chinese. Now, okay, so now you know what it means in Italian, that Italian means, now say it in Chinese. And they say, okay, make the connection. That sort of thing. So there's a lot of work to be done away from the piano, away from the vocalizing, the singing as a singer. And also building up the character. And any sort of bits of history you need to know, about the period of the opera.
So you had to do your own research, kind of.
Yeah, it's great. I used to love that. Well, because I'd done that sort of academic work, obviously at Cambridge before. So I've always enjoyed that side of it. I've always enjoyed building up the character and the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. In that time when you were preparing for roles, did you have to also have like a separate job that was music maybe, or would the payout
Well,
you get from a gig like that?
it wasn't quite so frightening in those days, the
Right.
cost of living.
Yeah.
So with a few, well, I mean, of course I did concerts, and in those days also there was more of that available, probably. Choir, amateur choirs would hire a professional singer to do the solos, so we were always going all over the country to sing like that. I did have a slight sideline, which was renovating old houses, so which is quite good because it was quite physical.
Yeah.
In the very early stage, but I didn't have to do that for very long because I was lucky. I started getting enough work to pay my living early on.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So when did yoga come into your life in all of this?
Yoga. Yes, as I say, I kept fit. I used to go to the gym to tone the muscles, not to sort of bodybuild or anything like that, or play. I wasn't playing competitive sport then. No, just to keep yourself toned. Because standing on a stage for 2.5 hours, delivering a role, and a very dramatic role like the ones we've suggested, it's Olympic athlete really. You've got to be very strong and have good stamina. The yoga, how did that come in? It came in having read about it, and I think it was when I went back to Glyndebourne later on in my career that I met somebody and she was running a yoga class nearby, and so I started doing it. I think this is really interesting. Talking about balance and support, really, in the yoga position, you're stretching in two different directions. So it's that law of equal and opposite in physics, and that you could feel would open up the expressive part of your body, by having that.
Yeah.
But it means in both directions, you've got to be strong in both directions.
Yeah.
Because as you breathe out, and you have to breathe out very dynamically as a singer, as you breathe out, there's a danger your body will collapse and the resonance will get restricted. So there has to be something going wah the other way. So you've got to, and yoga is very good because it takes you through, a series, they call them, I do a series of 25 poses every day practically, still. And that really turns the whole body. That's the good thing about yoga, is that it does deal with the whole body, not just specific bits of it, which is what we need as musicians. The whole body needs to be involved, in the process.
Do you think it was beneficial as well in terms of finding a sort of work-life balance or like stress relief maybe?
Oh, there's that as well. Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. You wake up some mornings with all sorts of stuff going on in your head, or a bit of stress or whatever. And you've got to make a decision about something, an important decision. I wouldn't now do it until I'd done my yoga. Because during the yoga, the mind quietens down.
Yeah.
They call it the playful monkey of the mind. It quietens down, and you get a sort of space between the thoughts, and often the decision just sort of comes. Oh, there it is. It comes to you rather than you sort of say, "What shall I do? What shall I do?" Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So no, very good from that point of view. Because as you know from performing, you've got to be very focused, haven't you? You can't be. And yoga is very good mentally as well as physically from that point of view. Yeah.
So you've created your own opera company called Travelling Opera, and you've also been the director of opera at the Royal Academy of Music.
Yeah.
You're teaching, and you were performing a lot as well. I was wondering, how do you find any sort of balance with all of these things on your plate?
Well, I tend to do one thing at a time. So it's quite a way back now, and I started when I built. First of all, I did the this short time at the Royal Academy, which is an interest in, directing and training and stuff like that. And then I just decided that I'd start my own company, which sort of, I also started something called British Youth Opera, which is still going, which is great. But then I thought, I'll start my own company and try and keep it going throughout the year, so you've got this consistency, which is what young performers need. And using, it's a bit like as I had done, using actually performance to further your training rather than doing a specific training course somewhere, So I was bringing in people from Trinity and elsewhere to create this company of about 15 to 20 youngish singers, which is good for opera because most of the characters in opera are youngish, especially the female roles. So that was good. I couldn't keep that going because conditions changed, things changed, all sorts of things changed, and so I then started training singers in the conservatoire here, and probably from then on doing less performance myself, and developing other skills like conducting and using the experience I had as a singer to help as a conductor singers work with a conductor, because I'd worked with great conductors, and exploring the relationship between conductor and performer. It's a bit like the relationship between teacher and student. It's a very interesting relationship, which has got to work both ways. So yeah, I think I've been able to focus on one thing at a time rather than juggling a lot of balls. Although you'd be right in thinking that I have done a bit of juggling. And at the time, was that the question you wanted answered? This, how do you cope with so many different? Yeah. They're not so different though, in a sense. I mean, they're all related, kind of. They're coming from your core strength and your core passion. Yeah, they're all related.
Do you enjoy teaching?
Yeah, very much. And as I said, I've learned a lot from teaching.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Actually, yeah. A lot of sense that you are.
I've learned a lot from teaching. A lot about, and trying to give the student confidence that not only the audience, but also the people auditioning you when you get to that stage, they actually want you to succeed. They're not sort of wanting to put you down. And I always say to students that just regard the audience as your best friend. You've got a best friend, you tell them anything, when hey, I want to talk to you, and you tell them your deepest thoughts. Well, regard the audience as your best friend. You're in the character that you're playing. Tell them exactly what you're feeling. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear your story, and they want to share the feelings involved.
Yeah, that's a really helpful approach, I think, because especially while you're studying, a lot of it performing is just I'm just trying to make no mistakes.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. But that's why it's such hard work, because it's the same in sport. You've just got to work at the preparation until you can't get it wrong, until it's right. So there's a lot of hours, as I say, not just singing or playing, but in doing the other work, the work on the text so that you do stand up with complete confidence. And then, you say, this is the stage I'm at. Tell your story, and as I say, treat the audience as they love you and you love them. So it's a...
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, but this kind of answers that question. How do you deal with, this constant striving for perfection in music, but you're never going to fully reach it?
Yeah. Well, you have to, as I say, you have to work very hard. Yeah. And then you have to do a performance, obviously. But then you say, well, this is the stage I'm at. And if the performance attitude is right like that, then people are not going to say, oh, it's not quite good enough yet, is it? They're not going to say that. They're going to say, well, it was a performance.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed that, you know, as you're finding all the time when you're assessing people, you know, this. Yeah.
I have two really practical questions for you that I hope will be helpful for any singers listening. And one would be, when you approach a new piece of repertoire and you have to learn it quite quickly, I don't know if that ever happened to you, but do you have any tips or tricks for them to be like, oh, this is what you can do to make it?
Well, I have had that, and as I said before, ideally you want to spend a lot of time, especially working on the roles you're going to do a lot, you know, like Count Almaviva or Don Giovanni or whatever. But there are occasions when that happened to me a couple of times. The intendant, it was in Venice actually, says, hey, you couldn't learn this opera in the next 10 days because the guy's just phoned in sick.
Okay.
And you say, okay, yeah. So then I think the skills you developed, you know, learning it methodically, you just need to apply the same system, but do it quicker. So don't do anything else for 10 days.
Right.
Don't enjoy yourself for 10 days. And be methodical. And as I say, with an opera role or a song, don't try to do it all at once. Study the language, get the language right, understand it completely. No, don't worry about the music yet, because the language, it was the lyrics or the poem that inspired the composer and the librettist. So work on that. It's a bit of a slog, because you're a musician, you want to sing, you want to play. But work on the language. So I used to spend hours just with the words, you know, walking around the canals of Venice or the downs of Sussex near Glyndebourne, just learning the words. You get some funny looks sometimes from people who, you know, you don't listen to people going by, you're going, a bit of a nutter over there. Anyway, so that's stage one, and the context that they come from, you know, the period, the character. And then do them in the rhythm of the music. You know, so still you're not singing it, you're not making the music yet. Methodical. And then, without losing the character that you've built up through speaking the words, and then speaking them exactly at the rhythm that's written, then start to sing it using your singing technique to do it properly. So do it in sort of stages, and that's what I did with this thing. I had big role I had to learn in a short time. I applied that process, and you know, it's a quicker and more efficient way of learning something than just putting the score on the piano and starting to go da 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 da, no, you know, trying to do all 3 or 4 things at once.
So you did learn an opera in 10 days?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then subsequently, and I've been in situations where I've sung, I think, 3 different operas in 1 week.
Okay.
And possibly even a recital as well. And people say to you, how do you do that? How do you do 3 different? But then, you know, you could play 3 different piano concertos.
Well, not yet, but one day. Yeah. So my second really practical question would be, what are the do's and don'ts that you figured out over the years when you worked with conductors, orchestras, singers? I think you've worked with Charles Macaras.
Macaras a lot, yeah.
Macaras from his name.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Do's and don'ts. Do as they want you. They're in charge. They've got to make the whole thing work. You just got to make one bit of it work. You know? And having become a conductor of opera, you know, you really start to appreciate. Oh yeah, this is not easy. You need the singer, you know, to understand your job really. And that's something that should probably be part of the training, understanding the conductor's job, and you just can't sing it how you think it should go. So appreciating other people, and I think, and Callas said this, understanding what the instrumentalists do as well. You know, understanding that she used to sit. She didn't used to take part in the performance, but she used to do go to an orchestral rehearsal. And just sort of notice, oh, that's on the oboe, right, and sort of learn a bit about the oboe. and how they, naturally phrase. So I think that's it. Do get to know more about the conductor's job and the techniques and the issues with different instruments that are going to accompany you, and you're going to be a part of this wonderful whole. I mean, it's the most thrilling thing you could imagine, standing on stage with an orchestra and a conductor. And asking for help, I think, is good, especially asking the conductor, saying, don't, for singers, don't sing anybody else's part. Don't.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, don't, everybody's on their own journey. Respect the other person's journey, And don't answer, don't say anything unless you're asked a question. Don't sort of say, well, I think this, just like out of the blue sort of thing. Don't express.
So basically kind of know your place.
Yeah, don't judge as well, that's very important. Certainly don't voice any judgment. And also don't try to justify where you are or how you work. My way is the way. Never do that. Everybody has their own way. Because I've said, that thing about, being meticulous about the preparations. Other people have said, oh, I don't do it like that. But then you listen to them and you say, oh, that's a good way of doing it as well. You're working backwards from the music to the spoken text rather than from the text to the music. Maybe because I studied literature that I tend to go from the text end to the musical end.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach on it. Yeah, everyone's coming to it from a different kind of point. So you also got to perform in quite a lot of different countries like North America, South America, Australia, I believe.
Australia, a long time in Australia. Yeah,
Can you tell us a bit about how that was for you and maybe how it came about, some of it?
Yeah, lucky circumstances. Agents putting you forward for things. I won the big competitions. They were helpful sometimes for putting it out there. It's quite worth looking at all the sort of international competitions, because as I say to them now, any whether you win or not, or whether you get a job from an audition, don't worry about the outcome. That's quite yogic, actually, yogaish. Don't pin your hopes on the outcome. Enjoy the act of performance. It's a chance to perform. That's a gift. Any chance to perform. And if they don't want you and you're rejected, don't go. Say, oh, thank you very much. You've sort of built up my muscle a bit. A famous actor said that to me once. Don't treat rejection as a negative thing. Treat it as a positive thing, because it's a bit like resistance training in the gym. Your muscles get stronger if you've got something to work against. That wasn't what they want, I've got to do something different next time. Anyway, back to travelling all over the world. Amazing privilege to work in different countries and different cultures. And I've never really been interested terribly much in tourism for its own sake, going somewhere. Oh, you must go there because that's a really nice place to go. Going somewhere like Venice, where I spent, half a year, and working and becoming involved with the culture and making contacts in that country. That's a real privilege. That's a real privilege to be able to work in other countries. And there's an opera singer. That's great because you don't sing every night. You have a bit of time between performances to explore the culture. So that's the way. That was great to do it that way, to get to know the world.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That
That's
way,
amazing.
rather than a cruise or a package tour. That's great great in its own way, obviously. But no, it's been a very, very privileged career.
If you look back, when you look back, do you have anything that you regret in your time as?
Regrets, yeah. Je ne regrette rien. Yes, you shouldn't have regrets, should you? Because it's a journey, it's your own particular journey, it's your story. It's like Schopenhauer said about, everybody has a novel. You just tell your own story. No, no regrets. I'd have done things differently knowing what I know now. But that's not a regret, I don't think. It was as it was at the time. And you're not the person now that you were then.
Yeah, you have to kind of look at yourself with
you've
compassion
changed
and,
physically, you've changed in every way. Especially if you've done yoga for 20 odd years, you do evolve into a different sort of person, I think. Well, for that and other reasons as well in your life. No, just things I'd have done differently, and so it's a great privilege now to be in a teaching position where you could look back over your own career and say, well, I wouldn't have done that, and then you can give the right advice now to the new generation, because you can see them perhaps going the same way that you went at that stage, because you didn't have the right guide at that moment or whatever. Because starting your own company, is a crazy idea, because it's so hard without any sort of background in the whole production side of it and the whole administrative side of that. But I think with a new idea, you have to take that risk. You have to take that leap of faith. If your idea is different from the mainstream, different from the conventions as they are.
Yeah, that's how new exciting things come to be.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, you just got to look at any composer or anybody to say that, they took a big risk there. Yeah.
What do you think is your greatest accomplishment?
Greatest accomplishment. Well, it was great because with my company, I sort of rewrote the operas to a certain extent. I translated them into English. And so I could use my sort of English skills to write an opera, you're writing poetry almost, you're writing lyric drama. And some of them work really well. So to see that process through, write it, then, cast it, audition people, very specifically what you wanted, and then, put it into production, and then tour it all over with the audience coming to see it and responding to it. I wouldn't say that, on the first night or I was saying, well, that's great, isn't it? Because you're thinking of the next thing. Like the great impresario George Abbott, who produced so many Broadway shows, said, I think, that was good, what's next? So you've already, by the time you've seen it fulfilled, you're thinking, that seems to work, what should we do? So I think, I think that was, if I was to say an accomplishment, that was it was a great thing to have had the opportunity to do, to see it through from the creative idea, write it, rearrange the music for smaller orchestra, more chamber-sized orchestras, so the orchestra was more involved because they're closer to the action, and see it through. That was
it's a very massive kind of thing to do. I think. I remember reading a review, I think yesterday evening, about one of was it the Magic Flute? I think was it in the Barbican?
Right.
That you performed it.
Yeah, we did things in the Barbican.
Yeah, it was a good review.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. I'm actually coming to the end of this interview, and I had one really stupid question. So I asked some people via social media, what do you want me to ask in my interviews? And my brother got back to me, he's an engineer, and he said, please ask them, why music and not engineering? So I said, I'm going to ask it.
What?
Why music and not engineering?
Why music and not, what, in my case? I'm no good at maths.
Right, that's an easy answer.
What else could I have done? It's interesting, engineering. In my early teens, before it became clear, I've got to go with this music thing, and there were various stimulators. Like in your later teens, you start going to music festivals and things. You start rubbing shoulders with people who are a little further on the training thing, and you think, this is fantastic. So, but before that, I wanted to be an architect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I used to draw a lot, again, which is why, starting a company was interesting from the design point of view, because I had a sort of feel for shape and structure. So now I was very keen on that idea. And this is, you then come up against it in the great works of Bach and, the sort of symmetry of stuff, which is architectural. Because I sort of grew up in a cathedral, I grew up from the age of 8 to whatever. And then went to another beautiful city to further study. So I've always been surrounded by beautiful architecture, and including now as well in this beautiful site here. Yes, I've been very lucky to have lived and worked in architecturally very beautiful places. And it's not unrelated, is it, to what one's actually ended up doing?
Well, we're glad that you ended up becoming a musician instead. But I think that was it. Thank you so much for
great pleasure.
Speaking to me and to our listeners. Hopefully there will be some. And thank you.